Hello, and welcome to Nightly History. Tonight we will travel high into the mountains of South America to a place where the air thins, the clouds drift like rivers, and the world seems to stand between earth and sky. Imagine yourself walking along a narrow path of stone, carved into the side of a green and mist-covered ridge. Far below, the Urubamba River winds like a silver serpent through the valley. Around you, orchids hang from mossy cliffs, and the cry of a condor echoes somewhere beyond the fog. The air is cool, wet with the scent of rain and ancient stone. As you climb higher, the mist begins to lift, and there, resting on a saddle between two mountains, you see it a city of terraces and temples, built from perfectly fitted stones that seem to grow from the mountain itself. It is quiet here, no engines, no crowds, only the wind whispering through the ruins. For centuries, no one beyond these valleys knew this place existed. Hidden above the clouds, it was forgotten by time, until a single explorer, guided by local farmers, brought it back to the world's attention in the early 20th century. This is Machu Picchu, the lost city of the Inca, a royal sanctuary built nearly 6 centuries ago under the rule of Pachacuti, the visionary emperor who turned a highland tribe into one of the greatest civilizations in the Americas. Here, the Inca built not for war but for wonder. Their temples faced the rising sun, their fields followed the curves of the earth, and their stairways climbed toward the heavens like prayers carved in stone. For almost 400 years, this city slept beneath the forest canopy, untouched by conquest, preserved by silence. When the world rediscovered it, Machu Picchu seemed less like a ruin than a message, a reminder that human hands, when guided by reverence rather than conquest, can shape harmony out of rock and sky. Tonight, as the world around you grows quiet, let us ascend together into the heart of the Andes. Let us walk through the terraces, the temples, and the halls of the sun, and listen to what these mountains still remember, a civilization that lived close to the clouds and built its peace upon the breath of the earth itself. So settle in, let the noise of your day fade away, let the slow rhythm of history carry you upward to the forgotten city above the clouds. High in the heart of the Andes, long before the word Peru had meaning, the mountains already carried the weight of stories. The ridges rose like frozen waves, carved by time and silence, and between them, small villages clung to the terraces of stone. Life here was never easy, yet it was patient, measured by the rhythm of the seasons, by the whisper of wind against rock, by the slow ripening of maize. It was from this thin air that a people began to shape their destiny. They called themselves the Inca, the children of the sun, and from a valley ringed by mountains, the sacred valley of Cusco, they would build an empire unlike any the world had seen. No one knows exactly when their story began. Some legends say it started with a man and a woman who rose from the waters of Lake Titicaca, sent by the sun god Inti to bring order to the world. Others tell of a golden staff given to Manco Capac, the first Inca, who was told to wander until he found the land where the staff would sink effortlessly into the soil. That place, the story says, was Cusco, the navel of the earth, the centre of the 4 great quarters of the world. Whatever its origin, the truth is that by the early 1400s, the Inca had already begun weaving together the scattered tribes of the Andes into something larger, something united not by conquest alone, but by shared roads, shared gods, and shared breath. At first, their domain was modest, a network of valleys, highland farms, and stone villages connected by rough paths. But around the year 1438, everything changed. a new ruler ascended the throne, a man whose vision would transform a mountain people into the masters of an empire stretching from Ecuador to Chile. His name was Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui. His name meant he who turns the world upside down. Before Pachacuti, Cusco had been a strong city, but vulnerable. Neighbouring tribes, the Chanca, the Colla, the Huanca, challenged its power constantly. According to Inca tradition, when the Chanca army approached the city, with thousands of warriors, Cusco's nobles fled in fear. But Pachacuti, then a young prince, refused to abandon his people. He rallied what few defenders remained, invoking the spirit of Inti, and met the invaders in battle. When the dust settled, Cusco still stood, and the Chanca were broken. From that moment, Pachacuti's destiny was sealed. He did not merely repair what was damaged, he reimagined the world. In the years that followed, he reorganized the Inca state into a structure that would endure for centuries. He transformed Cusco into a symbol, not just a capital, but a miniature model of the universe, laid out in the form of a puma, the sacred animal of power and strength. At its heart rose the Coricancha, the temple of the sun, whose walls were once plated with sheets of gold that caught the morning light like fire. Pachacuti's genius was not only military, but spiritual and administrative. He envisioned his empire as 4 vast regions: the Tawantinsuyu, the land of the 4 quarters. Each region was connected by roads that climbed mountains, crossed rivers, and threaded through deserts. A network so advanced that some of its paths are still walked today. These were not mere roads of commerce, they were arteries of unity. Messengers known as chasqui ran along them, carrying knotted cords called quipus, which recorded messages and numbers. In a world without writing, the Inca had invented a language of threads and colour. Through this system, Pachacuti extended his reach far beyond Cusco. Villages that once warred now exchanged goods. Farmers cultivated crops at different altitudes, potatoes high in the cold, maize lower in the valleys, coca leaves in the jungles. Llamas and alpacas carried woolen grain across the empire, their bells echoing like small prayers. Every citizen contributed labour to the collective, a principle called mita'a, a duty owed not to kings, but to the community itself. Under his reign, the Inca learned to master the mountains rather than fear them. They carved terraces from impossible slopes, transforming sheer cliffs into gardens that caught both sunlight and rain. They built canals that carried glacier melt across miles of stone. They learned to read the stars, to know when to plant and when to rest. In their cosmology, every river, every rock, every peak had a spirit, a huaca, and to live well was to live in balance with them all. It was within this flowering of order and vision that Pachacuti looked upon a ridge above the Urubamba River, a remote, cloud-swept saddle between 2 peaks. Here, the mountain breathed mist from its lungs at dawn. The sun rose exactly where 2 ridges met. It was, to the Inca, a place of perfect harmony, halfway between earth and the heavens. And so, around the mid-15th century, he ordered the construction of what we now call Machu Picchu, a royal estate, a place of retreat and ceremony, perhaps even a mirror of the celestial world itself. The builders who came here were not ordinary masons. They were chosen artisans, architects of the divine. Every block of granite was shaped by hand, pounded and smoothed with stones, until each surface fit its neighbour with the precision of a heartbeat. No mortar, no cement, only weight and gravity balanced perfectly. It is said that when an earthquake struck, the walls danced, shifting slightly, then returning to place unharmed. To the Inca, this was not coincidence. It was proof that their work had been blessed by the mountains themselves. At the same time, Pachacuti's empire continued to expand. From the northern highlands of Quito to the deserts of Chile, his generals carried the emblem of the sun. But unlike the empires of Europe or Asia, the Inca did not impose their gods through fear. They absorbed, adapted, and incorporated. Local deities were welcomed into the pantheon. Local leaders kept their status if they swore allegiance to Cusco. Conquest was followed by construction, roads, temples, and terraces, as if the Inca believed that to bring order was to bring light. Still, even as their dominion spread, the high Andes remained their heart. The empire's strength lay not in its armies, but in its rhythm, a cycle of planting, harvest, worship, and rest. Pachacuti's rule marked a golden age of unity, where the landscape itself became a cathedral. From every corner of the mountains, people came to Cusco carrying offerings, woven cloths dyed with cochineal red, gourds filled with chicha beer, figurines carved from gold. They gathered for the great festival of Inti Raymi, the Feast of the Sun, where the first rays of winter light struck the Temple of the Sun and bathed the city in gold. For them, time was not a line but a circle, and every year the circle returned to the sun. Yet even in times of greatness, there was fragility. The Inca had no iron, no wheels, no written alphabet. Their empire rested on faith, communication, and discipline, on the runners who carried words through mountains, and the priests who read meaning in the stars. Such a world could last only as long as its harmony endured. From the terraces of Cusco, Pachacuti might have watched the sun sink behind the peaks, the sky deepening to the colour of copper. He could not have known that his descendants would rule for barely a century more before strangers from across the sea would arrive, men in metal armour, riding animals no Inca had ever seen. But for now, the empire was young, and the mountains were kind. The air shimmered with the breath of creation, and above the clouds, a city was being born, one that would survive not through conquest, but through silence. To understand Machu Picchu, you must first understand the patience of stone. Here, in the thin air above the Urubamba Valley, every block, every terrace, every stairway was not just built, it was taught where to belong. The Inca did not force the mountain to yield. They listened to it. Each ridge, each slope, each curve of granite was studied until the builders could feel how it wanted to breathe. They carved with respect, never with haste, and somehow, out of cliffs and clouds, they created a city that still stands 6 centuries later, untouched by time, untouched even by the trembling of the earth itself. No other civilization in the pre-Columbian Americas built quite like the Inca. In the Old World, great empires raised arches, domes, and columns, but here, high in the Andes, stone became something different. Not an obstacle to be shaped, but a partner in creation. The technique was called ashlar masonry. Stones cut and shaped so perfectly that they could hold together without a drop of mortar. No cement, no binding clay, only the precision of human hands and gravity. When the first rays of dawn strike Machu Picchu, you can see the craftsmanship come alive. The walls shimmer with dew, the edges glowing pale gold, and for a moment it seems as if the mountain itself is exhaling light. Each block is slightly irregular, yet fits its neighbour as if they had grown together in the dark. Archaeologists have found that the builders used nothing more than stone hammers, chisels of harder rock, and an understanding of fracture lines learned from generations of working the earth. To shape a single block might take weeks. To build a wall could take a lifetime, but perfection here was not decoration, it was devotion. The Inca believed that the world itself was alive, filled with spirit, and that every mountain, every river, every field possessed its own soul, a huaca. To build in harmony with that spirit was to honour it. To carve a stone carelessly was to offend it. So each wall of Machu Picchu was a form of prayer, a way of aligning human order with cosmic order. The city itself follows the logic of nature. It sits astride a narrow ridge, between two peaks, Machu Picchu, the old peak, and Huayna Picchu, the young peak. From this perch, the builders could watch the sun rise over one horizon and set behind another, as if time itself was being measured by the mountains. Below, the Urubamba River curls in a perfect arc around the base, like a guardian serpent encircling a nest. Above, clouds drift through the valleys, wrapping the terraces in silence. It was here that Pachacuti ordered the impossible, to build a royal estate suspended between worlds. It would serve both as a place of retreat and as a temple to the gods, a space where the emperor could commune with Inti, the sun, and with the spirits of the mountains, the Apus. It was to be a city of balance, human yet celestial, practical yet sacred. The work began around the mid-15th century. Hundreds of labourers, engineers and artisans arrived, climbing steep trails that wound through forests and mist. They brought no beasts of burden large enough to carry stone, no wheels, no metal tools, no written plans. Yet somehow they raised more than 200 structures on this fragile ridge. Everything they needed, every slab of granite, every bundle of maize, every drop of water, had to be carried by hand. The first challenge was the mountain itself. The ridge was steep, unstable, prone to landslides during the rainy season. To build on it required genius, not brute force. So the Inca began from the ground up. They created a network of terraces, each one a living foundation, layers of gravel, sand and soil that let water drain without washing the slope away. To the untrained eye, the terraces look like decoration, endless steps for the gods to climb. But they are the reason Machu Picchu still stands. These terraces transform the mountain into a living organism. During heavy rains, water filtered gently through the layers. During droughts, the same terraces stored moisture and released it slowly to the crops. They were both architecture and agriculture, beauty and function woven together. Some modern engineers who have studied them call Machu Picchu an ancient model of sustainable design. Then came the canals, narrow veins carved into stone, feeding water from mountain springs into every corner of the city. Archaeologists have traced more than 16 fountains, each one flowing down from the one above it like a musical scale of water. The main source still runs today, pure and cold, trickling from the same spring that served Pachacuti's court. It was not just a water supply, it was ritual. Each morning, priests purified themselves at the fountains before the ceremonies of the sun. At the city's highest point stands the Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun. It is a carved pillar of granite, rising from a stepped platform, precisely aligned with the solstices. At sunrise and sunset, on the shortest and longest days of the year, its corners cast no shadow, a perfect dialogue between stone and light. The name suggests what the Inca believed, that by this sacred pillar, they could tie the sun to the earth, ensuring its return and the continuation of life. Spanish chroniclers later wrote that such stones were destroyed throughout the Andes after the conquest, deemed idols of a pagan faith. But this one survived, hidden in the clouds, its purpose forgotten, yet intact. Around it, the rest of the city unfolds like a poem, written in geometry. There are temples dedicated to the moon, to the condor, to the three windows, each aligned with the cardinal points and the paths of celestial bodies. The stonework grows finer, the closer one moves to the sacred core, as if the builders measured holiness by precision. In the outer sectors where the attendants lived, walls are simpler, rougher, yet even there nothing is careless. Every stair, every drain, every doorframe is placed to catch rain, wind and light just right. Modern engineers studying these structures have found their logic impeccable. Each building rests on deep foundations of crushed rock, allowing it to shift without breaking during earthquakes. Each channel and drain is angled precisely to guide water away, and each terrace is anchored into bedrock. Together, they form one of the most stable ancient constructions in the world. When tremors shake the Andes, Machu Picchu flexes, then settles, unharmed. For the Inca, perfection was not excess, it was equilibrium. They did not decorate their temples with gold or jewels here, those belonged to Cusco. Here, the adornment was harmony itself. The sight of mist brushing against stone, the echo of footsteps on granite stairs, the whisper of the wind through terraces of green. Even today, visitors who come at dawn often describe the same feeling, that Machu Picchu does not seem built by human hands, but grown from the mountain like a blossom of light. The city was divided into two great halves, the Hanan, the upper sacred sector, and the Hurin, the lower residential one. This division reflected the duality that guided all Inca thought: sun and moon, male and female, sky and earth, life and death. Between them ran the main square, a space of gathering and ceremony. From there, narrow stairways rose toward the temples, while paths descended to the agricultural terraces. Every movement in Machu Picchu was symbolic, every direction a prayer. At the heart of it all, Pachacuti's private quarters overlooked the valley, facing east toward the sunrise. Each morning, light entered his window, as if summoned by design, striking the same stones that still gleam at dawn. Here he could look out over a world of his making, mountains, arranged like a sacred calendar, rivers coiling like serpents, clouds drifting like incense. From this place, the emperor might have felt closer to the gods than to men. Yet for all its grandeur, Machu Picchu was not vast. It was intimate, a city of silence more than of spectacle. Archaeologists estimate no more than 700 or 800 people lived here permanently. They were caretakers, priests, farmers, and artisans who maintained the royal estate for when the emperor visited. Their lives revolved around rituals, tending the terraces, preparing offerings, and maintaining the delicate balance between the living and the divine. Imagine them at dawn, a line of priests in woven cloaks, climbing the steps to the Temple of the Sun, carrying bowls of maize beer and bundles of coca leaves. The mist swirls around them. They pause before the doorway to watch the first beam of sunlight slide across the floor, striking the altar where offerings of gold once shimmered. Outside, llamas graze quietly along the terraces, their wool damp with dew. From somewhere down the slope, a flute begins to play, soft, slow, almost indistinguishable from the wind. For centuries, the city would serve its purpose, a retreat for royalty, a sanctuary for the soul, a bridge between heaven and earth. Then one day it would fall silent. The footsteps would fade. The fountains would still run, but no hands would cup the water. The terraces would green with wild grass, and the stones would wait again, patient as always. No one knows precisely when that moment came, when the last Inca left Machu Picchu behind, But the city they built, against all odds, remains. Through rain, through quake, through centuries of solitude, it endures. Proof that what was once impossible simply needed time, faith, and stone. If you look down from the ridge at dawn, the city seems to breathe with the mountain. Clouds move like tides, flowing over terraces that curve in rhythm with the slope, and sunlight slides across the granite as if guided by invisible hands. Nothing here feels accidental. Every wall, every stair, every open space was placed as though the builders were mapping the heavens onto the earth. To the Inca, geography was never only geography. It was a reflection of spirit, the visible skin of a living universe. They believed that the world was divided into three realms: the Hanan Pacha, the upper world of the sun, the moon, and the stars; the K Pacha, the world of the living; and the Uku Pacha, the inner world below, where roots and ancestors dwell. Human life existed at the meeting point of these realms, and Machu Picchu was built precisely on that line, suspended between earth and sky, light and shadow, life and memory. When Pachacuti's architects chose this site, they did not choose it for convenience. They chose it for alignment. The ridge sits between two peaks that rise like sentinels, Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu, both sacred mountains, Apus, believed to be protectors of the valley. Below flows the Urubamba River, curling in a great U-shape that mirrors the path of the Milky Way above. To the Inca, this was not coincidence. They saw rivers as earthly reflections of the celestial river, and so the placement of the city, encircled by water and sky, was an act of cosmic symmetry. From every corner of Machu Picchu, the landscape speaks. The Temple of the Sun curves perfectly, with the contours of the rock beneath it, as if grown from it. Its eastern window captures the sunrise of the winter solstice, when the year is reborn and the sun begins its long climb back towards summer. Each June, the first beam of light enters the window, passes through the chamber, and falls on a carved altar within. An ancient calendar written in light. This was the heart of their most sacred ceremony, Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun. At that moment, priests raised golden cups of chicha beer, offered coca leaves to the fire, and thanked Inti for returning to warm the fields once more. Beside it lies the Temple of the Three Windows. Each opening faces a different direction, framing a different part of the sky. Some scholars believe they represent the three realms of the Inca cosmos. Others see them as symbols of the three sacred ancestors of humanity. Through them, the morning light poured like liquid gold, bathing the chamber in radiance before spilling onto the plaza below. It was here, perhaps, that the first rays of the solstice were greeted with songs and instruments made of bone and clay, their tones rising into the mist like prayers turned to sound. And then, crowning the sacred sector, stands the Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun. Carved from a single block of granite, it is not a monument but an instrument. Its corners align with the cardinal directions, its angles with the solstices and equinoxes. At midday, on the equinox, its shadow disappears. The sun stands directly above it, bound for a moment to the earth. To the Inca, this was not science, it was communion. They believed that by tying the sun, they were maintaining the harmony of the cosmos, ensuring that day and night, season and harvest would continue their eternal dance. Spanish chroniclers who came later wrote of similar stones destroyed by missionaries, fearing the rituals they inspired. But Machu Picchu's Intihuatana survived, hidden from their reach, veiled by cloud and jungle. Its edges are still sharp, its surface is still warm under the noon light, Even now, when you place your hand above it, the granite seems to hum, as if the mountain itself remembers being touched by sunlight. The Inca worldview was built on connection. To them, a temple was never separate from the land around it. Every structure had a huaca, a spirit, a heartbeat, and these huacas were linked by invisible lines of energy called seques. Cusco, the capital, was the center of that great web. Machu Picchu was one of its radiant points, a node where the threads of earth and sky met. When priests performed ceremonies here, they were not praying to the heavens above, but through the landscape itself, activating the power that flowed between mountains, rivers, and stars. Standing on the terraces, you can see how their geometry followed this belief. The agricultural fields curve like amphitheatres, each contour echoing the natural slope. The stairways follow the flow of water. The drains empty precisely where the mountain's own channels would lead. Nothing breaks the harmony. It is as though the city were breathing with the terrain, inhaling fog, exhaling sunlight. Modern researchers have confirmed what intuition already suggests. Machu Picchu was built according to astronomical and geological principles. The main axis of the city runs roughly northwest-southeast, following the path of the sun across the valley. The location also sits atop a zone of intersecting geological faults, which may have made quarrying easier, but also required a profound understanding of stability. The Inca engineers embraced both, using fractures to obtain perfect building stone, while designing their terraces to resist the same tectonic stresses. It was balance made literal. To the west, beyond the residential sector, lies the Sacred Rock, a massive boulder shaped by nature, but refined by human hands to mirror the outline of the mountain directly behind it. It is both a shrine and a reflection, a reminder that creation is repetition. What exists in heaven must exist on earth. Pilgrims likely touched it before ceremonies, pressing their palms to its cool surface to absorb the strength of the mountain's spirit. Farther down the slope, near the edge of the site, are smaller shrines dedicated to the moon and to fertility. These caves, softly lit by the morning sun, may have served as womb-like symbols of renewal, entrances to the Ukupacha, the inner world. Here women performed rituals for planting and childbirth, weaving offerings of seeds, shells, and woven cloth. To step inside one of these caves is to feel the heartbeat of stone, the air cool, the echo deep, the sense of being inside the memory of the earth itself. The Inca did not separate science from faith. Observation and worship were the same act. When they watched the stars move across the night sky, they saw ancestors walking their eternal paths. The dark shapes in the Milky Way, the llama, the serpent, the toad, were as important as the constellations of light. During the dry season, when the river's curve reflected the Milky Way's arc, the heavens and the earth became one continuous mirror. It was said that at such times, the boundaries between worlds grew thin. The dead could hear the living, and the mountains could answer prayers. In the plazas of Machu Picchu, festivals celebrated this unity. Dancers moved in circles, echoing the motions of the planets. Priests read omens in the flight of birds, in the colour of flames, in the ripples of water, in ceremonial basins. Nothing was random. Every act was a conversation with nature, every gesture a note in the music of the cosmos. For the people who lived here, daily life was infused with reverence. A farmer planting potatoes would face the sunrise and whisper thanks to Inti before digging the soil. A mason, shaping a stone, would breathe upon it, acknowledging its spirit before lifting his hammer. Children were taught to greet the mountains each morning, lifting their palms to the peaks before beginning their chores. To live was to participate, not to dominate, not to own, but to belong. This sense of belonging shaped every detail of Machu Picchu's design. The city's layout reflects duality, upper and lower, sacred and secular, male and female. Yet it also forms a single whole, joined by stairways and water channels that run like veins. Scholars often describe the site as an architectural map of the Inca worldview. The terraces represent the earth's skin, the canals its blood, the temples its heart, and the Intihuatana its mind. Together, they form a living body, a world made tangible. At night, when the fires burned low and the sky cleared, the priests would gather on the upper terraces. The stars over the Andes burned brighter than in most places on Earth, their light sharpened by altitude and cold. They believed each star was a guardian, watching over a lineage, a village, or a field. Somewhere among those stars, the souls of the dead were said to travel, glowing points slowly making their way toward the horizon, then returning with the dawn. To look up from Machu Picchu at such a moment was to see not distance, but kinship, heaven as an extension of home. From that perspective, the city was never isolated. It was a node in a vast spiritual geography, stretching across the Andes, a network of sacred sites connected by pilgrimage routes and energy lines. Pilgrims could travel for weeks from Cusco or from distant valleys to stand here, where the world felt thin enough to touch the divine. Even today, the old trails remain, narrow paths paved with stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, climbing through forests scented with orchids and rain. Walking them is to retrace the path of ancient devotion, a journey from the realm of men into the breathing heart of the mountains. When dawn returns to Machu Picchu, the same light that guided the Inca still spills across the terraces. The river below still gleams like a thread of mercury, and the mountains, those silent witnesses, still hold their vigil. For all our satellites and maps, no one has ever improved on what Pachacuti's builders achieved here. A city that does not compete with nature, but completes it. Perhaps that is why Machu Picchu endures. Not because of the hardness of its stone, but because its design carries the memory of harmony, a geometry that belongs as much to the stars as to the soil. And in that harmony, one can still feel the pulse of an empire that believed the world itself was sacred, and that by building in reverence, they could bridge the distance between the human and the eternal. When morning comes to Machu Picchu, it does not arrive all at once. It seeps through layers of mist, touches one terrace at a time, and paints the granite walls with a faint golden breath. The city awakens slowly, as if the mountain itself were stretching after a long dream. There are no bells, no horns, no cries of merchants, only the rustle of wind through the itchu grass and the soft patter of sandals on stone. For those who lived here, life began with light. Every dawn was a ceremony, not grand but intimate. When the first beam of the sun broke through the clouds and struck the temple of the sun, the priests raised their arms to the horizon and whispered a prayer of gratitude. They called to Inti, the life-giver, asking for warmth for the crops and health for the people. Then the city went quietly to work. Machu Picchu was not a capital, not a crowded metropolis like Cusco. It was a sanctuary, part royal estate, part spiritual retreat, part agricultural laboratory. Only a few hundred people lived here year-round. Priests, attendants, farmers, stone cutters, and the families who kept the place alive when the emperor was away. When Pachacuti or his descendants visited, the population swelled, processions filled the plazas, music echoed through the terraces, and smoke from the kitchens curled into the mountain air. But most days, the rhythm was gentle, deliberate, and deeply tied to the turning of the sky. Each inhabitant knew their place within a circle of purpose. The farmers tended the terraces, climbing the steep paths with woven baskets of seed. They worked in pairs or small groups, speaking little, letting the scrape of their wooden tools fill the silence. They cultivated maize, beans, potatoes, and quinoa, but also plants for medicine and ritual. Coca, cassava, and herbs used to bless the fields. Because of the altitude, they learned to read the weather as if it were a language. The movement of clouds, the smell of rain, the tilt of the wind. A single wrong day of planting could cost a harvest. So they listened, not to orders, but to the mountains breathing. In the afternoons, the terraces glowed a soft green. Children carried water in clay jars, splashing it between rows. Women wove cloth in the shade, the bright colours of their textiles echoing the wild orchids around them. The Inca prized weaving as a sacred art. Each pattern told a story of lineage, faith, or geography. A cloth woven here might travel down the royal road to Cusco as an offering to the temple or to dress the mummified ancestors of the royal line. Threads were memory. Colour was identity. Above the terraces, the priests kept the rhythm of the heavens. Their duties were not to rule, but to maintain balance between the human and the divine. They observed the motion of stars from the Intihuatana and watched how the light moved across temple floors. When the equinox came, they held ceremonies that lasted through the night, fires burning in stone basins, chants echoing off the cliffs. The smoke drifted upward to the peaks, carrying prayers to the Apus, the mountain spirits who guarded the valley. Every chant was an act of gratitude, every silence a form of listening. Not far from the temples stood the homes of the caretakers. They were built from the same granite as the sacred walls, but their stones were rougher, their roofs made of thatch bound to wooden beams. Inside, fire pits glowed with coals even in daylight, warding off the mountain chill. Llamas rested outside, tied near storehouses filled with maize and dried potatoes called chuño, food that could last for years. Dogs barked occasionally at the sound of condors circling overhead, but mostly the city remained wrapped in quiet industry. The Inca had no written language, but they had quipus, bundles of coloured strings knotted in complex patterns. A trained keeper called a quipucamayok could read them like a book. He would run his fingers along the chords, feeling each knot, interpreting numbers, names and inventories. Through these chords, the administrators of Machu Picchu recorded harvests, stored supplies, and tracked labour owed under the mitre system. Every piece of the city, from the fountains to the fields, was accounted for. But the quipus also held stories, family records, and possibly songs. They were threads of a civilization that spoke in texture instead of ink. At midday, the city slowed. The sun stood directly above, and its heat shimmered off the granite. Workers gathered near the fountains to drink cool water and chew coca leaves, which eased the altitude's breathlessness. From the emperor's quarters, a flute might drift down the slope, a single melody repeating like a lullaby. The music of the Andes has always been sparse, pauses longer than phrases, notes rising and vanishing like mist. It is music meant for mountains, where echoes take time to return. When visitors came, nobles from Cusco, messengers or craftsmen, they followed paths that wound past terraces and temples until they reached the main plaza. There, they bowed toward the sun and offered gifts, baskets of fruit from the jungle below, feathers from tropical birds, shells carried from the Pacific. Each offering represented a piece of the empire, a reminder that all regions, from sea to highland, were connected by faith. To stand in Machu Picchu was to stand at the centre of that unity, a meeting place of all worlds. Food was simple but abundant. Meals often consisted of maize porridge, roasted guinea pig, and potatoes seasoned with herbs. During festivals, they brewed chicha, a sweet fermented drink made from corn, poured from ceramic jars, painted with patterns of sunbursts and serpents. It was more than refreshment, it was communion, shared among families, between rulers and workers, between the living and the spirits of the dead. No one drank alone. Life here required both strength and humility. The mountain offered much, but demanded respect. Rain could turn paths into rivers, wind could strip roofs in a single night, and frost could burn crops before dawn. When such misfortunes came, the people did not curse the gods. They held ceremonies to ask forgiveness. They saw disaster as imbalance, a reminder that harmony must constantly be renewed. At dusk, the colours of Machu Picchu changed again. The stone turned bronze, then rose grey, then nearly blue as the shadows lengthened. Fires flickered in the courtyards, and smoke drifted upward through the roofs. In the Temple of the Condor, where a natural rock outcrop forms the wings of the sacred bird, priests placed offerings of flowers and maize. They believed the condor carried messages between worlds, flying from the realm of humans to the realm of the gods. As night fell, its carved stone wings caught the last light, glowing faintly against the dark. Night in the Andes comes quickly. The temperature drops, the mists return, and the stars appear in swarms, sharp, cold, endless. Families huddled close to their hearths, telling stories of creation, how the first Inca emerged from caves near Lake Titicaca, how the sun sent his children to teach humanity how to live in balance. These stories were not entertainment, they were inheritance. Each retelling tied the people more closely to their ancestors, reminding them that their lives were part of something larger and continuous. Far above the city, the priests still kept vigil. They watched the constellations rise, the llama, the fox, the serpent, shapes made not from stars, but from the dark gaps between them. To the Inca, the night sky was a map of shadows, not light. The dark shapes guided farmers as surely as any calendar. When the black llama appeared high overhead, it was time to bring the herds to lower pastures. When the toad rose near the horizon, the rains were coming. Even the silence between stars carried meaning. Below them, the river's voice never stopped. All through the night, it roared through the canyon, echoing off the cliffs. A constant reminder that the world below was still awake. Some said it was the sound of the earth's pulse. Others said it was the whisper of ancestors, forever circling the base of the mountain. Life among the clouds was not rich in gold or conquest. It was rich in rhythm. Every action, planting, building, praying, resting, fit within the same slow heartbeat. Time here was measured not in years but in returns. The return of the rains, the return of the sun, the return of balance. And though the Inca Empire stretched for thousands of kilometers, from the deserts of Chile to the jungles of Ecuador, its spirit was contained in places like this. Quiet sanctuaries where harmony was a daily practice. Perhaps that is why Machu Picchu feels different from any other ruin on earth. Its silence is not emptiness, it is memory. It holds the rhythm of footsteps long gone, the laughter of children playing among terraces, the murmured prayers of farmers at dawn. It holds the scent of wet stone, the taste of maize, the smoke of fires that once kept families warm. It holds a way of living that saw no border between the sacred and the ordinary. When you stand here today, looking out at the mountains, you are seeing the same horizon those people saw 6 centuries ago. The same light touches the same stones. The same wind carries the same faint smell of rain. What has changed is only us, our pace, our noise, our hunger to measure everything except stillness. To live among the clouds, the Inca learned to slow down until they could feel the mountains pulse beneath their feet. They built their homes, their terraces, and their faith upon that pulse, and for a time, they lived in balance with it. Then one day, history would pull them away. The balance would break, and the mountain would fall silent again. But for now, in this moment between light and shadow, the city still breathes. Its terraces still glow with the memory of harvest. Its stones still carry the warmth of hands that shaped them. And above it all, the clouds move softly through the valley, carrying with them the faint, unbroken rhythm of a civilization that once learned how to live in harmony with the breath of the earth itself. There are moments in history when the world changes quietly, not with thunder, but with the sound of footsteps on unfamiliar soil. By the early 16th century, the empire of the Inca stretched farther than the eye could see. From the deserts of northern Chile to the forests of Ecuador, from the Pacific coast to the peaks of the Andes, it was a realm stitched together by roads, rituals, and faith. It had endured earthquakes and droughts, civil wars and rebellions, but it would not endure what was coming. Not because it lacked strength, but because the shape of the world itself was about to shift. The year was 1532. Across the ocean, in Spain, the age of conquest had begun. Galleons crossed the Atlantic, carrying men who sought glory, gold, and salvation all at once. One of them was Francisco Pizarro, a soldier hardened by years in the Caribbean. He had heard of a land high in the mountains, where temples were sheathed in gold, where rulers were worshipped as gods. He called it Peru. When Pizarro landed on the coast with barely 180 men, the empire he faced was already wounded from within. Only a few years earlier, two royal brothers, Atahualpa and Huascar, sons of the late Emperor Huayna Capac, had plunged the realm into civil war. Atahualpa ruled the north from Quito, Huascar the south from Cusco. Armies marched, families divided, temples were burned in the name of succession. By the time Atahualpa triumphed, the unity that Pachacuti had built a century before was fractured, and into that fracture stepped the Spaniards. In the highland city of Cajamarca, Pizarro met Atahualpa under a banner of peace. The air was thin and cold that day, and the plaza smelled of dust and sweat. The Spaniards came with steel armour, cannons and horses, creatures the Inca had never seen. They carried weapons that spat fire and thunder. They carried words that demanded conversion in the name of a distant god. When Atahualpa refused, the meeting turned to massacre. Thousands of Inca warriors were cut down in minutes. The emperor, bound in chains, watched his world collapse in the shadow of strange machines. He offered gold for his freedom, a ransom so vast it filled an entire room from floor to ceiling. Pizarro accepted, took the treasure, and then killed him anyway. With Atahualpa's death in 1533, the sun itself seemed to dim. The empire without its child became an orphan. From Cusco to Quito, cities burned. Temples were stripped of their gold, idols were toppled, and the great road of the Tawantinsuyu filled with the echo of foreign hooves. The Spaniards, in awe and greed, searched for more gold, more cities, more heavens to claim. They scoured the mountains for the mythical city of Vilcabamba, said to be the Inca's final refuge. But they never found Machu Picchu. High above the Urubamba River, the sanctuary remained untouched. It was too remote, too hidden in cloud and forest. There were no mines to tempt invaders, no great armies to announce its presence. While the rest of the empire burned, Machu Picchu simply faded from the map. Its inhabitants, priests, caretakers, families, slowly departed. Some followed the royal line into exile in Vilcabamba, others descended into the valleys, blending into local villages. No record tells us the last day the city was alive, but somewhere between 1536 and 1572, it fell silent. The rituals ended first. The fires in the temples burned low. The Intihuatana cast its final shadow on a morning when no priest was there to greet it. The terraces grew wild, their canals clogged with leaves. The llamas, once tended by human hands, wandered off into the hills. Within a generation, the jungle began to reclaim the stone. The Spanish chroniclers wrote volumes about Cusco and Vilcabamba, but none mention Machu Picchu. To them, it never existed, and perhaps that was its salvation. For while the conquistadors dismantled temples elsewhere, tearing stones to build cathedrals, the sanctuary of the clouds was left alone, guarded by mist and distance. It did not fall to war, it was swallowed by silence. For the people who remained in these valleys, the memory of the city survived only in whispers. Farmers in nearby hamlets spoke of terraces hidden above the clouds, of walls built by ancient hands, of a place where the sun still answered prayers. They called it by many names: Picchu, Huayna Picchu, Patalacta, but the true name was already lost. The language of empire was fading, replaced by the tongue of Europe. Meanwhile, far away in Spain, the wealth of the Inca was melted down, shipped across the sea, and turned into coins. The temples of the sun were replaced by churches. The sacred roads of the Andes carried soldiers, missionaries, and disease. Within decades, smallpox and influenza spread faster than armies, cutting through villages that had never seen a single Spaniard. The population of the Andes fell by more than half. An entire world, its songs, its rituals, its sense of harmony, began to dissolve into legend. And yet Machu Picchu endured. Unnoticed, it remained exactly as it was, a frozen breath of the 15th century. The terraces still caught rain, the fountains still flowed, the stones still stood in perfect balance, but they stood for no one. Generations passed, trees grew through the temples, roots splitting the cracks between stones. Orchids and bromeliads draped the walls. Birds nested in the window frames of the royal palace. The city slept, and the mountain dreamed with it. By the 17th century, Machu Picchu had disappeared completely from memory. Missionaries mapping the valleys mentioned old terraces and mysterious ruins, but they never climbed the ridge. Travelers passed below, following the river to the jungle, unaware that above them lay an entire city hidden by green. In a way, the Inca had achieved what no empire ever had. They built something so perfectly in tune with nature that nature itself protected it. For almost 400 years, the sanctuary remained wrapped in mist. The world changed below. Kingdoms rose and fell. Machines roared into being. Cities of steel and glass replaced those of stone. But here, on this Andean ridge, time moved differently. Seasons passed, rains fell, moss thickened, and still the stones held their silence. Then, in the early 20th century, a few local farmers began clearing land for crops on the lower terraces. They found carved stones and old stairways, but to them, these were simply remnants of their ancestors, nothing remarkable. The jungle was full of such ghosts. It would take an outsider to see the sleeping city for what it truly was. In 1902, a Peruvian farmer named Agustin Lizarraga stumbled upon the site while searching for new farmland. He carved his name in charcoal on one of the temple walls, not knowing that he had just walked into history. 9 years later, In 1911, the American explorer Hiram Bingham, guided by local residents Melchor Arteaga and Pablito Alvarez, climbed the same ridge. When the clouds parted, he saw the terraces unfold before him, the stairways, the temples, the walls. He believed he had found the lost city of Vilcabamba, the last refuge of the Inca kings. He was wrong, but the world would never be the same. News of the discovery spread quickly. Photographs of Machu Picchu appeared in National Geographic in 1913. For the first time, the outside world saw the lost city of the Andes, a city untouched by conquest, preserved by silence. Bingham's name became legend. Lizarraga's almost forgotten. But in truth, it had never been lost, only waiting. As archaeologists and historians studied the site, they realized how perfectly it reflected the philosophy of the Inca: unity between people and nature. Every wall, every canal, every terrace had purpose. Nothing here was accidental, and though centuries had passed, the stones still fit so tightly that even a blade could not slide between them. The city that had outlived its empire had also outlived its conquerors. The Spanish never reached Machu Picchu. They took gold, silver, and souls, but not this. What they could not find, they could not destroy. And so, while the empire fell and the world forgot, Machu Picchu became something else: a witness, a testament to what humanity can build when guided by reverence instead of greed. When the first archaeologists cleared the overgrowth, they found stairways still intact, altars still aligned with the solstice, fountains still flowing as they had in the 15th century. It was as if the city had been waiting for light to return. The wind that moved through its corridors carried not despair, but calm. The same calm that must have filled it when the last inhabitants walked away, leaving nothing behind but silence. Today, when you stand among its stones and listen, you can almost hear that silence speaking. It is not empty, it is full of echoes, of memories, of time held still. The fall of the Inca was not just the collapse of a kingdom, it was the loss of a worldview, a belief that the earth itself was sacred, and that to live well was to live in balance with it. The conquistadors conquered land, but not that idea. And perhaps in the quiet survival of Machu Picchu, that idea still endures. The empire ended in blood and fire, but this city ended in peace. No armies marched through its gates, no temples burned. It was left alone, to be reclaimed by the forest, by the rain, by the whisper of the Andes. And in that surrender, it found immortality. For centuries, while history wrote of conquest and kings, the mountain kept its own record, one of patience, endurance, and return. The sun still rose on the solstice, just as it always had. The river still wound its silver path below. The wind still carried the same note through the stones. Nothing essential had vanished. It had only gone quiet, waiting for those who could listen. When an empire dies, it leaves echoes, ruins, stories, broken monuments that still whisper its name. But when Machu Picchu was abandoned, it did not leave echoes. It left stillness, a stillness so complete that even memory began to fade. At first, the city stood as it always had. The terraces still caught the morning light. The fountains still murmured their endless song. But without hands to tend them, the balance slowly shifted. The mountain, which had once been shaped by human purpose, began to breathe on its own again. Roots thickened in the cracks between stones, moss softened the sharp edges of walls, and the mist, eternal and patient, drifted in to claim the place as its own. Nature did not destroy Machu Picchu, it embraced it. The vines that crawled over temples were not invaders, but caretakers. keeping the granite cool and moist. The rain that wore down stairways also nourished orchids and ferns, painting the city in shades of green. The forest was not a conqueror, but a healer, and in that healing, the city disappeared. For centuries, the ridge became a realm of plants and animals. Giant ferns unfurled beside the same fountains that once reflected sunlight onto golden altars. Hummingbirds hovered where incense once burned. Tree roots traced the lines of ancient walls, binding them together even as they broke them apart. The sound of flutes and chants faded, replaced by the calls of toucans and the rustle of capuchin monkeys leaping from branch to branch. The jungle turned stone into forest and forest into memory. Yet even as it vanished from the eyes of men, Machu Picchu remained perfectly alive. The terraces, still lined with their gravel layers, drained the rain as they always had. The canals continued to flow, channeling water down the mountain with flawless precision. The architecture endured because it was not an imposition on nature. It was part of it. Every curve, every angle, every channel had been designed to serve the same forces that would one day reclaim it. It is said that Machu Picchu survived because it was humble enough to yield. Down in the valleys, people continued to speak of a lost city above the clouds. Quechua farmers told travellers about stone terraces hidden in the mist, about steps carved into impossible cliffs, about a place the Spaniards never found because it belonged to the mountains, not to men. But such stories were like mist themselves, visible for a moment, then gone. By the 18th century, even these tales grew faint. The city became a legend, told in fading dialects, passed between herders who looked up at the peaks and wondered what slept there. The Spanish Empire rose and fell. Independence came to Peru in the 19th century. Steamships appeared on the coast, railways wound through the Andes, and explorers, European, American, Peruvian, began to trace the outlines of a forgotten world. They found temples in the jungle, fortresses of stone buried in moss, and roadways vanishing into the wilderness. But Machu Picchu remained untouched, hidden behind a veil of cloud and forest. The Incas had built it for secrecy, and the earth had honoured that design. In the 1800s, maps of the region showed nothing where it stood. Surveyors listed only the deep valley of the Urubamba River, fringed by mountains with names few could pronounce. A handful of local farmers worked small plots on the lower terraces, unaware that the stones beneath their feet were once walked by emperors. To them it was simply La Montaña Vieja, the old mountain. When they cleared the brush to plant corn, the granite walls emerged like bones from soil, smooth, unyielding, still alive. They built their homes beside them, using fallen stones as steps, never realizing they were living inside a masterpiece. Above, the forest continued its slow work, epiphytes rooted in the joints between stones, wrapping them in tendrils. Ferns dripped with dew, rain pooled in cracks and dried again, leaving green stains on the granite. Each year, the jungle grew thicker, more intricate, a labyrinth of vines and moss and silence. Machu Picchu was not vanishing, it was transforming, becoming what it had once imitated, the living face of the mountain itself. Time in the Andes moves differently. The rest of the world marked centuries with wars and revolutions, with inventions and discoveries. But here, the clock was rain and growth, decay and bloom. The ruins did not age, they breathed. Every monsoon polished the stones, every dry season revealed their colours again. When lightning struck, the granite split, and in that crack a seed sprouted. The mountain absorbed what had been made by man, the way a tree absorbs fallen leaves. Then in the early 20th century, the silence was broken. In 1911, guided by local farmers and Quechua families, Hiram Bingham climbed the ridge in search of the last Inca stronghold. When he reached the saddle and the mist parted, he saw the terraces unfolding below him like steps to another world. Vines hung over doorways, trees grew through walls, but beneath the green, the city was intact. Every stairway, every altar, every stone where it had been placed centuries earlier. He believed he'd found Vilcabamba, the lost city of the kings. He was wrong, but his discovery brought Machu Picchu back into the light of history. The world saw photographs of the ruins, ghostly stairways vanishing into cloud, temples half swallowed by roots, the Andes rising like waves behind them. For centuries, Machu Picchu had been a secret shared between the earth and the wind. Now it was seen by millions. The forest, which had hidden it so faithfully, began to retreat. Men came with machetes, notebooks and cameras, clearing the vines, measuring the stones. They uncovered the fountains, mapped the plazas, and traced the outlines of temples buried under centuries of growth. Yet even in its rediscovery, the forest was not defeated. Every morning, the mists still rolled in, reclaiming the city until midday. Even now, archaeologists say that without constant care, the jungle would return within a decade. Roots would split the walls again. Orchids would fill the courtyards. The city would disappear just as before. Machu Picchu exists in a fragile balance between visibility and concealment, half remembered, half forgotten, and perhaps that is how it was meant to be. For the Inca, the mountain was never something to conquer, it was something to become. Their temples were not built to rise above the forest, but to join it. When nature returned, it did not erase their work, it completed it. In the whoosh of mist and rain, the human and the natural are indistinguishable. When visitors come now, they walk along paths once buried in vines. They see the same fog that once hid the city and call it mystery, not realizing that it is simply the breath of the forest. At sunrise, the peaks glow gold. By afternoon, the clouds close again, and Machu Picchu vanishes into white. Every day it is born, and every night it disappears. A ritual as old as the mountains. The forest takes, but it also keeps. It has preserved what conquest and time could not. It guarded the stones through centuries of rain and silence. It buried the empire's memory, not to destroy it, but to let it rest. And when the time was right, it gave it back, whole, serene, untouched by the noise of the world. Today, as scientists study its terraces and tourists trace its steps, the forest still holds dominion here. If you stray from the main path, within minutes the jungle swallows sound itself. You can hear water dripping from leaves, the hum of unseen insects, the steady breath of the valley. You begin to understand why the Inca built here, not to escape the world, but to listen to it more closely. Sometimes when the rain begins to fall, the city seems to dissolve before your eyes. The outlines blur, the colours soften, and the stones disappear into mist. In those moments, you can almost see what the last caretakers saw 500 years ago. The earth reclaiming what it lent, the divine returning to the silent. Machu Picchu's story is not one of loss, it is one of return. The forest took it back, yeah, but it did so gently, lovingly, in the way time takes everything back to its source. And in doing so, it ensured the city's survival. What is forgotten can be destroyed, what is hidden can endure. The Inca may have vanished, their empire broken, their gods silenced, but their creation was too closely tied to nature to ever truly die. At night, when the last visitors leave and the mist thickens again, The city becomes what it once was, quiet, remote, whole. The terraces glisten with rain. The river below hums in darkness. A single star pierces the cloud, reflected faintly in the water still running through the ancient fountains. The forest waits, eternal and patient, ready to protect its secret once more. And as dawn returns and the light seeps back into the mountains, Machu Picchu reappears, not rebuilt, not restored, simply revealed. A city caught forever between memory and forgetting. A city that learned the rarest secret of all, how to endure by letting go. When the 20th century opened, the world believed it had already mapped everything. The poles had been reached, the rivers traced, the mountains measured. Exploration seemed to belong to another age. But deep within the Andes of Peru, there still existed a place untouched by time, a place the modern world had forgotten and the ancient world had never revealed. It waited, as it always had, among clouds and silence. By 1911, Peru was a young republic, proud of its Inca past, yet uncertain of where that past truly lay. Legends spoke of a lost city, Vilcabamba, the final refuge of the Inca kings who fled the Spanish conquest. Historians argued that it lay somewhere in the jungles west of Cusco, where rivers and mountains formed a labyrinth no map could explain. Among those who listened to these stories was a Yale historian named Hiram Bingham, a man who had studied empires from afar and longed to stand where history had gone quiet. Bingham's journey began not as conquest, but as curiosity. He arrived in Peru on horseback, following trails that wound along cliffs and rivers. He carried notebooks, a compass, a revolver, and a restless desire to see what no one else had seen. Local guides told him of ruins in the mountains, places where farmers found stones too large to move, and terraces too perfect to be natural. They spoke of one site high above the Urubamba, where clouds never lifted, and where, according to rumour, ancient spirits still guarded the stones. On July 24th, 1911, Bingham and his small team, along with a local farmer named Melchor Arteaga and a young boy, Pablito Alvarez, crossed the Urubamba River on a narrow wooden bridge, slick with moss. They climbed a steep trail through dense vegetation, hacking through bamboo and vines. Rain dripped from leaves, and the air was heavy with the scent of earth. Hours passed. Then, as the mist began to thin, they reached a small plateau, and there, half buried beneath ferns and roots, stood the remains of walls, perfectly fitted, carved from grey granite, rising from the jungle, like the bones of the mountain itself. When the clouds parted, the terraces appeared, falling away in endless steps. A flight of stone stairs led upward toward a cluster of temples. Bingham stood still for a long time, stunned. He later wrote, "Suddenly I found myself confronted with the walls of a ruined city. It seemed as though I'd been transported into a dream." He believed he had found Vilcabamba, the last capital of the Inca. In truth, he had found something far older, far purer, Machu Picchu. He did not know it then. But in that moment, the mountain opened its eyes and the world began to remember. Over the following weeks, Bingham and his team cleared parts of the site. They uncovered temples, stairways, fountains, and homes. They mapped the city's layout, took photographs, and sent word back to Lima. From there, the news spread across oceans. In 1913, National Geographic devoted an entire issue to the discovery, filling its pages with black and white images of mist-shrouded terraces and timeless stonework. Readers from London to New York stared at those photographs and felt something rare, wonder. In an age of machines and factories, here was a reminder that the earth still held mysteries that could not be measured by steel or science. For the people of Peru, the rediscovery of Machu Picchu awakened a sleeping pride. It was proof that their ancestors had built not just an empire of gold and conquest, but an empire of harmony and vision. The city became a symbol of endurance, of beauty, of what survives when all else falls. But like all discoveries, this one came with shadows. The story that the world heard was told mostly through Bingham's voice. He was brave, yes, and tireless, but not the first to set foot here. Years later, evidence would emerge that Agustin Lizarraga, a Peruvian farmer, had visited Machu Picchu nearly a decade earlier. On a wall inside the Temple of the Three Windows, he had left his name in charcoal. R. Lizarraga, 1902. When Bingham arrived, that mark was still there. He mentioned it in his notes, and then over time, the mention faded. In history, fame often follows the one with the louder pen. Still, it was Bingham's expedition that brought the city to the world's attention. With support from Yale University and the National Geographic Society, he returned twice more, in 1912 and 1915, to excavate and document the site. He shipped thousands of artifacts, pottery, tools, bones, textiles, to the United States for study. Decades later, these objects would become the subject of long negotiations between Yale and Peru, finally returned to Cusco in the 2010s, to rest once more near the land that had shaped them. During those early excavations, the team uncovered more than stones. They found the traces of lives, charred remains of hearths, grinding stones for maize, burial chambers, where women and men were laid to rest facing the sunrise. Each discovery rewrote what the world thought it knew about the Inca. These were not people lost in myth, but engineers, astronomers, and artists who understood the geometry of nature better than any civilization of their age. When Bingham first stood before the Intihuatana, he did not yet grasp its significance. To him, it was a beautifully carved monolith. To the descendants of the Inca, it was the heart of the city, the stone that tied the sun to the earth. Scholars later realized that its alignment with the solstices was precise to within a fraction of a degree. Even after centuries beneath vines, it had not shifted. The mountain itself had protected its accuracy. In the years that followed, Machu Picchu captured the imagination of the modern world. Poets compared it to Atlantis reborn. Historians called it the Eighth Wonder. Travelers came from every continent, climbing the Inca Trail to stand where Pachacuti once stood and to feel, if only for a moment, the weight of timelessness. The same mist that had hidden the city for 4 centuries now became its halo. Photographs showed it floating above the clouds like a dream made solid. But even as the world celebrated, the mountain remained unchanged. It had seen empires rise and fall. It had watched the jungle swallow its stones and then release them again. The forest had given the city back, but not to one man and not for fame. It had given it back to memory itself. By the mid-20th century, archaeologists confirmed that Machu Picchu was not Vilcabamba, but a royal sanctuary built in the mid-1400s under Pachacuti's reign. It was older, purer, untouched by conquest. While other Inca cities bore the scars of war, this one had survived through absence. It had waited not for discovery, but for rediscovery, the moment when human eyes would once again look at it with reverence instead of hunger. In 1983, UNESCO declared Machu Picchu a World Heritage Site, calling it a masterpiece of art, architecture, and engineering, and a unique testimony to the Inca civilization. The city became a pilgrimage once more, not for priests or kings, but for people seeking silence, perspective, and awe. And though millions have walked its path since then, it still has the power to hush even the most restless traveller. Every morning, as the first light touches the Intihuatana, a new generation witnesses what the Inca once did. The sun returning to the mountains, cameras click, whispers rise, but then a strange quiet falls. The same quiet that must have filled the valley when Pachacuti first looked out from his sanctuary and felt the world align. Hiram Bingham died in 1956, never fully understanding the enormity of what he had brought back to the world. He had sought a lost capital, a monument to conquest, but what he found was something far more enduring, a monument to harmony. In his later writings, he admitted that Machu Picchu seemed to exist between heaven and earth, like a vision that refuses to fade. Perhaps he sensed in the end that it had never been lost at all. For the people of the Andes, the rediscovery was less a revelation than a homecoming. Their ancestors had never left these mountains. Their songs, their rituals, their language, Quechua, still carried the breath of those who built the terraces and temples. When the city emerged from the forest, it was as though a voice long silenced had begun to sing again. Not of conquest, not of gold, but of balance. The rediscovery of Machu Picchu was, in truth, the rediscovery of an idea. That civilization does not have to mean domination, that progress can be measured in harmony, that endurance can come through silence. It reminded the modern world, obsessed with speed and power, that something built in patience could outlast all of it. Today the terraces gleam once more beneath the mist. Trains bring travellers from Cusco, winding along the same river that once guarded the city. The stone steps, worn smooth by centuries of feet, still climb toward the temples. The fountains still sing, and every sunrise, Machu Picchu seems to awaken not from sleep, but from remembering. The city does not belong to any one nation or name. It belongs to time, to the endless dialogue between nature and humanity. And as long as the sun keeps rising over the Andes, its light will find the stones again, just as it did 500 years ago. Because some things are not truly discovered. They are only rediscovered when the world, for a brief moment, becomes quiet enough to see them again. There are places where time becomes thin, where the present stands so close to the past that you can almost feel them breathing together. Machu Picchu is one of those places. It does not belong to a century, or to a nation, or even to history itself. It belongs to the silence between the clouds. When you walk its terraces at dawn, the stones seem to remember every footstep. The air carries a stillness so deep that even your heartbeat feels borrowed. Mist slides between walls, softening their edges, turning them into memory before your eyes. You begin to understand that what survives here is not the empire of the Inca, nor the glory of their kings, but something far more enduring, the relationship between human hands and the earth they shaped. For 5 centuries, the city has endured storms, earthquakes, and the weight of forgetting. It has survived precisely because it does not resist. Its foundations shift with the mountain. Its terraces breathe with the rain. It is a lesson carved in stone, that permanence is born not from defiance, but from harmony. Every year, tens of thousands climb to Machu Picchu, following the same winding path through cloud forest that once carried Inca priests and courtiers. They come searching for different things: history, adventure, peace, proof that something so perfect could have been made by human hands. Yet when they reach the top, when they stand before the Intihuatana or look out across the valley, words fail. The noise of the modern world falls away, replaced by the same hush that has lingered here since the 15th century. What they find is not a ruin, it is a mirror, one that shows how small we are, and how vast the world can be when we stop trying to measure it. Scholars still argue over its purpose. Was it a royal estate, a temple complex, an astronomical observatory, or all of these at once? But such debates miss the point. The genius of Machu Picchu is not what it was for, but what it embodies. The idea that beauty can emerge from restraint, that knowledge can live in silence, that architecture can be an act of listening. Each wall, each stair, each curve of terrace reflects an understanding that to build something lasting, one must first learn how to belong. The Inca called their empire Tawantinsuyu, the land of the four quarters. Its roads stretched for more than 25,000 miles, binding deserts, coasts and mountains into a single breath. Yet when that empire vanished, this single city, hidden between two peaks, became its voice. Machu Picchu is not the capital of a fallen realm. It is the memory of balance, preserved in stone and cloud. There is a word in Quechua, Sumacauce. It means good living, or more deeply, living in harmony. Not wealth, not conquest, but balance with the land, with others, with the rhythm of life itself. That philosophy was the quiet foundation of the Inca world. You can still feel it here, in the terraces that catch water like cupped hands, in the stones that rest against each other without force, in the way the city hums softly when the wind passes through. Even after centuries of silence, the mountain still seems to speak that word, Sumac Cauce. At dusk, when the last tourists leave and the guards begin their slow descent, Machu Picchu returns to what it has always been, a sanctuary. The colours change with the fading light. Gold becomes rose, rose becomes violet, and then everything dissolves into silver mist. The birds grow quiet, only the sound of the river remains, winding through the darkness below. Somewhere in that sound is the pulse of the old empire still beating. If you stay until night, you can watch the stars appear one by one. At this altitude, the heavens feel close enough to touch. The Milky Way arches directly over the ridge, mirroring the curve of the Urubamba River far below. The Inca believed these two rivers, one celestial, one earthly, were reflections of each other. To them, the stars were not distant fires, but ancestors, returning each night to watch over the living. When the constellations of the llama and the serpent emerge from the darkness, you can imagine the priests of old raising their faces to the sky, reading the calendar written in light. 500 years have passed, and still the stars follow the same paths. The heavens have forgotten no one. In the silence of night, the city glows faintly under starlight. The stones seem almost translucent, as if holding the memory of the sun. If you listen long enough, you may hear what the wind once carried, the rustle of woven garments, the low chant of prayers, the crackle of sacred fires. But these are not ghosts, they are the language of endurance, the echo of people who built not to conquer, but to belong. When dawn returns, the light spills through the temple of the sun, striking the same altar it has struck for centuries. The rays slide across the floor, climb the walls, and touch the stones of the Intihuatana. And for a brief moment, the sun seems to pause, as if acknowledging what it left behind. That moment, repeated every day since the 15th century, is the heartbeat of Machu Picchu. It is not the light of discovery or rediscovery, but of continuity. the promise that what lives in balance with the world never truly ends. The rediscovery of the city in the modern age brought new challenges: tourism, restoration, preservation, words unknown to the builders, but essential to those who now protect it. The terraces must be maintained, the trails repaired, the fragile ecology of the mountain preserved against the weight of millions of feet. Archaeologists and local communities work side by side, trying to keep the place alive without erasing its quiet. Each year, the Peruvian government limits the number of visitors, reminding the world that even wonder must be approached with humility. For the true miracle of Machu Picchu is not that it was found, but that it has survived our finding. Many travellers leave the site changed, though they cannot always explain why. It is not the architecture alone, nor the view, nor the mystery. It is the sensation of standing in a place where human hands and the earth are not in opposition, where ambition was shaped by reverence, where civilization did not mean the taming of nature, but its reflection. In that recognition lies something profoundly human and profoundly rare. Perhaps that is what the city was built to teach, that we are part of a cycle larger than our desires, that what we build in harmony endures, and what we build in haste vanishes. That silence can speak louder than triumph, and that even an empire can pass away without losing its meaning, if its values remain carved in the bones of the earth. 500 years after Pachacuti walked these terraces, the world still looks to the Andes for lessons it once ignored. Climate changes, forests fall, oceans rise, yet here, a city made only of stone and patience still stands. It is proof that balance is not weakness, that humility is not fragility, and that gentleness, in the end, may be the strongest force of all. For every visitor who arrives, there comes a moment when the mist lifts just long enough to reveal the full sweep of the mountains, the river, the terraces, the sky. And in that instant, time collapses. You are not a tourist, you are a witness. You are standing inside a memory that never ended. When you finally turn to leave, you might look back one last time. The city will already be fading into cloud. Within minutes, the ridge will vanish completely, as though it never existed. But that is its way. Machu Picchu was never meant to be possessed. It was meant to be experienced and released, like breath. The Inca understood something that the modern world is still learning, that everything we build on borrowed ground. The earth gives and it takes back, but it never forgets. And if we listen, truly listen, we may yet remember how to live as they once did, not above the world, but within it. The city, above the clouds, endures not because it resists time, but because it belongs to it. It is the memory of a people who measured greatness not by what they conquered, but by what they preserved. And so, as the mist closes again, and the mountain sighs beneath the weight of sunlight, one truth remains: nothing made in reverence is ever lost. Machu Picchu stands as proof, a bridge between the human and the eternal, a whisper carved in stone that says, "Remember the light." The night has grown quiet now. The journey is ending, though the mountains remain. You have walked through the valleys of an empire, climbed the terraces of its faith, and stood beneath the same sky that watched it rise and fade. And yet, even after all these centuries, Machu Picchu has never truly fallen. It only learned to breathe in silence. Every civilization dreams of eternity, of monuments that outlast their makers. But the Inca, without knowing it, achieved something greater. They built not against time, but with it. Their stones were not meant to defy the mountain, but to belong to it. Their roads did not cut through the land, but followed its pulse. Even their gods were not above the earth. They were within it, in the rivers, the stars, the wind. That is why Machu Picchu still endures, long after empires of conquest have turned to dust. It was born from reverence, not domination, from listening, not demanding, from understanding that what we shape in harmony will remain, even when we are gone. When you stand among its terraces, you can still hear that truth in the rhythm of the wind. It moves through the grass and the stones like a quiet heartbeat, the same pulse that once guided the hands of its builders. It whispers the old language of balance, that the world is not something to conquer, but something to keep in trust. That silence is not emptiness, but memory. That peace, when built with care, can outlast power. In the modern world, we measure greatness by what we can change. But here, greatness was measured by what could be preserved. Each wall, each canal, each stairway was an offering, a gesture of gratitude to the mountain that gave them life. And so, when the empire fell and the world forgot, the city did not mourn. It waited. It let the forest wrap around it like a blanket, and it kept breathing softly, patiently, until the world was ready to remember again. Now, every sunrise that touches its stones is an act of renewal. The light that falls on the Intihuatana today is the same light that fell there 500 years ago. The river below still murmurs the same song. The clouds still rise and dissolve with the same grace. Time, it seems, has not passed here. It has only deepened. Perhaps that is what draws us to places like this. Not the ruins themselves, but what they remind us of. That there was once a way of living where every action was prayer, where architecture was gratitude, and where progress meant harmony instead of conquest. Machu Picchu is not a monument to the dead. It is a lesson for the living. It teaches that endurance is not resistance, that beauty is not luxury, and that wisdom often speaks in the quietest of voices. It tells us that the world we build will reflect the world we believe in, and that the most lasting creations are not those that dominate the landscape, but those that disappear gently into it. As the last light fades behind the peaks, the city begins to vanish again. The terraces blur into shadow, the temples sink into mist, and yet it does not feel like an ending. It feels like a return, as if the mountain is taking back its own breath for the night, only to release it again with the dawn. Because Machu Picchu was never meant to stand apart from time. It was meant to be part of its rhythm, a single heartbeat in the endless pulse of the earth. And that heartbeat still continues. So if tonight you find yourself closing your eyes and listening to the sound of wind, know that somewhere high above the clouds, it is moving through the same stones that once touched the hands of the Inca. It carries the same quiet wisdom, that nothing truly ends, that all things return, and that in silence the world remembers itself. Sleep now, beneath the same stars that watched over this city for 500 years. Let their light guide you gently into rest. And when morning comes, may you wake with the calm strength of these mountains, the stillness of their valleys, and the quiet knowing of Machu Picchu, the city that never forgot how to breathe. Thank you for listening. I wish you a peaceful, restful night, and I look forward to seeing you again on our next journey through history.